Hello, humans, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer. We are the MTV generation of gamers, right? We experience gaming differently. Now, so you guys know, my audience is made about 50% of people who are half my age. It's people under 30, and this, you know, video is not only for them, but for you, reminiscing of what we love, why we love it, and showing people just in general why we see video games sometimes differently, why we see media and specifically differently, because it's just a different market. It's not the market that we grew up with. And probably one big delineator in between the generations is coffee. Mm. Let me tell you, I love my coffee. I really do. But I can't see myself paying $10 for a cup of coffee, or even two cups of coffee, $10. I can't do it. I can't do it because to me, $10 represents so much more, so many things that I could do. Now, people in this day and age, and I'm not going to say my audience because obviously this is, an audience that appreciates video games and retro gaming. But in general, in the market, you'll have people that will complain about paying $10 for an album, for example. And how much richer is the experience of owning an album in CD and vinyl, whatever you want, to a cup of coffee that you could just, it's going to be over maybe in about an hour if you're even talking with somebody, if not on your way to work. But people are more than willing to do something like that, but will not put those kind of funds into a physical product like this that can last a lifetime. And let me ask you, how many albums for you in the MTV gamer generation, if you can explain to people in a newer generation, how many people have been influenced by entire albums? Because we have a generation now of gamers that had grown up on basically one hit wonders. If you're on a streaming platform, for example, there's so many artists right now that have one hit. They're known for one song. And, back in the day, you would have to produce a whole album, an album sometimes, in order to become relevant. And these artists were so important to the shape of, future music, inspirations. The Smiths, for example, were a band that influenced a lot of people, including, for example, who's making a big comeback right now? Oasis. Oasis was inspired by the Smith. And people love Oasis, and they're having sold out concerts and everything else. And the people that buy albums go to those concerts, right? I myself is a huge Oasis fan. But it's not only that kind of music, right? It could be rock and roll, it could be anything else. But us in the MTV generation grew up with albums, and they hold a special place in our heart. And we will pay, the $10 for an album, and we will not pay $10 for a cup of coffee or, anything else. And artists are so limited now as they are owned, corporately owned, right, by a lot of these companies that sign them to deals. Well, look at, talking about artistry, look at that. It's a Prince shirt. And he was famous for not bowing to a corporate and having him cheat him out of money on his contract. He eventually got out and produced his own music. Regardless, guys, artists now they're bound by these insane contracts. They can go, solo, but these artists, for example, in I don't know, in Asia, where they sign these 365 contracts where they own everything. They own your name, every appearance, every concert, whatever you do. This is a great example of how free artists were back in the day. One of the freest ones was David Bowie. Look at this game. On the Dreamcast, this is Omnicron, I'm trying to get it here. And he was involved in this game. And David Bowie was an artist in the truest sense. I remember him, when I was really young, and one of my favorite songs when I was a kid, right, when I was still a kid, he did a version of Little Drummer Boy with Bing Crosby, which was huge in the 40s, like with Frank Sinatra and stuff, and he was bridging all those gaps. And then he created so much music, but he had the freedom to work on other things, whether it was music, video games, everything else. Now for artists is much harder because whoever is behind them, whoever owns their contract, is not going to let them do it unless they get most of the pie, you know. And artists are going, well, why should I even do it? You know, if I'm going to do all this effort and somebody else is going to get the money, why am I going to go into these things? Or sometimes artists are prevented from even releasing albums because, you know, the company won't allow them to do it. There's, you know, several examples. So it's a completely different market. And the only way that you can tell these stories is by holding these things. You know, I can't tell my grandkids and my kids, you know, about the Smiths or how David Bowie did Omnicron just by word. Yeah, you could see, you know, you can hear me. I could try to explain the best as I can, but I can show you better than I can tell you, as a salesman used to say, right? And people now are unwilling to pay the price for something that will last a lifetime, at least your lifetime, right? You'll have the piece of plastic to tell the story, as opposed to buying a skin for a game that you don't even own. You don't own the game. You don't own the skin. It's all a rental until that company decides how long you should own it. And as soon as they're not making profit, guess what? You're done. You no longer own this game, or the platform, you know, servers are shutting down. EA, for example, is shutting down a bunch of games this coming year where, you know, people have paid for the game. They have no physical media. They own it either on a tablet or on a phone. And all that experience is going to be gone. There are no memories. You know, I think that's a sad part. And we've lost so much of it, especially in print. Guys, look, comic books. You know, how many people, how many modern directors, how many modern creators, how many modern video game developers have been inspired by comics? Many. And it's an art form that is dying. It's niche. You'll have certain groups here on YouTube talk about it. But, you know, when I take my grandkids to the comic book store, they're like, they don't even know what to do. They're used to, you know, the tablets that their parents get them, you know, and what have you. But I take them there, and I remember the first time that I took them, they didn't know what to do. They had a little table with a chalkboard, and they were playing there, right? But I took it through the comics, and I was explaining to them who everybody was, because they would see the comics here, and I had told them about the comic book store and how I used to go, you know, about this place, you know, and they finally went there, like, oh my gosh, it's really here. We kept on, it was almost like an art exhibit, if you will, you know, because they're looking at all the covers, you know, and I was telling them, okay, pick one, let's look at everything, right, and tell me who your favorite is, what favorite cover you want, and we're going to get those books, and they're going to have that experience to tell, right? And that is lost now because a lot, you know, kids aren't growing up on comic books. They're just not. They're not doing it like we did. How many people buy books anymore? I'm a big fan of Warhammer and the lore, you know, and I really wanted to get deep into it. This is a great book, by the way. But how many people are not willing to buy this because they know they'll never use it? They don't read. That's a problem with America. We don't read, right, as Americans. But, you know, it's sitting there, you know, and if you want to, you know, get kids into the Warhammer universe, you know, nowadays most people do it through the video game or, you know, maybe through an audiobook at best, right? And I download those from Audible, by the way. But yeah, that's the way they're trying to convey their love for the series, as long, you know, as well as the little soldiers. If they're into that, I don't have the room, guys. I have a baby. I can't. I know Henry Cavill is a big fan of that. But what I'm saying is, even our books, whether it's Lord of the Rings, you know, anything else, that medium is also not as strong as it used to be. I'm not going to say that it's dead, but it's not the preferred choice of today's generation, right? And we do. And if you're younger out there, let me tell you, I'm not saying that, you know, you have to be a complete addict like I am about this stuff, but you should, at least your favorite things, you know, get to know your favorite artists. Who were they inspired by? You know, whether it's a singer, whether it's a director, whatever. Let them tell you who inspired them, and then go look at those things and experience them and know why, you know, they think the way they do, why did those artists think the way they do. And it's a much richer experience, let me tell you. It is. It is. Owning an album holding, and looking at the lyrics, and seeing and experiencing a complete album by itself, and owning that album, being able to play it anywhere. You don't even know how many times I've been in places as I travel a lot where I have not been able to get internet, and I have my CDs with me, right? Or I have my portable video games, my old school, even the handheld Evercade. I remember in a power outage, it was out and I had it. I was able to game. People that had their cell phones couldn't game, right? But I was able to do it, and I had a lot of power because that battery lasts forever. You know, it was a different way of experiencing the world. That today's people miss. And if you're out there and if you want to get into these hobbies of collecting any type of physical media, let me tell you, it's going to be a richer experience for you. Whatever you're a fan of, and you can do it very inexpensively, especially when it comes to books, when it comes to albums, when it comes to video games, CDs, whatever. If you have a taste for a certain artist, for anything, chase it, man. You will not regret it. And with $20 can get you started in any journey, let me tell you. And it will be some of the most enjoyable moments that you've had with media in your life. At least that's been my experience. Tell me what you think. You still have your old comic books, your old books, your old CDs? Do you? I do. I try to keep them and I play them as much as I can. All right, humans, thank you for joining me. Make sure you like and subscribe. Right now, I have over 94 videos, right, for members only, outtakes, stuff like that. If you guys want to join, keep the conversation going over there. And I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for this year. It's been great coming back out of college, making these videos for you. Once again, has been enjoyable after so much time off. We're almost reaching 3,000, and it's all thanks to you. Thank you so much, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.